All right, y'all. So today we're going to talk about triggers in training. Now, Quinn Hennick and I have started to use a framework like this way back when he started doing the CWC and I started doing the CPC. Those are both the clinical athlete, weightlifting, and powerlifting certifications courses, respectively. But this is a tool and a framework as an athlete, as a coach, you can use to very quickly and simply guide decisions in training to better understand where pain is occurring and how to modify around and away from it. Because that's essentially what frameworks are. Frameworks are a way of taking complex information, taking those data points, combining them into a simple, streamlined structure so that we can make sense of them and hopefully have something executable from them. So we try to keep this nice and simple. It ends up looking like a Venn diagram. We have first big one, we've got second big one, and then we've got our third big one. Now, I'm not going to tell you how many times I tried to draw a Venn diagram because I'm terrible at it. But I break it up into three categories. The first one is going to be intensity. So very often we'll have an athlete come in, especially powerlifters, where say they've got knee pain in their squat. And this is the narrative that I hear. Dude, I'm warming up, feels great. I use the bar, no pain. I use 135, no pain. I use 225, no pain. And as soon as I hit 315, that's when the pain starts to bother me. So this is where we have an intensity trigger or an intensity threshold to the symptoms. The next instance is going to be a volume trigger. So this is the other narrative that we'll hear. And this has multiple different kind of subsets. So I'm gonna go into these here. So we have interset volume, right? So they come in and they're warming up and everything's fine. It doesn't really matter the load, but they get to the third rep and it's painful. They get to the fifth rep and it's painful. So there's a volume inside each set that becomes difficult. Now, we can also have a total volume, or you could look at it as like an intra-set, where it's the total volume of the day that becomes a trigger. So if they're doing a 5x5 on squat, we're going to stay with the squat example because I love squatting. If they do a 5x5 on squat, they're good until they're like the 19 to 20 rep total range. Once they get to that point, that's when the pain starts to flare up and then it never really goes away. So that's when we look at some total volume of the workout itself. The last one is also going to be frequency. So we'll see this one, it's less predominant than the other two, but frequency is still one that you want to manage. This is one I see with bench press the most often. Recently, bench press 5 days a week has gotten more and more popular, and people will find that by their fifth day of benching, they've got a lot of discomfort, they've got a bit of difficulty with performance, and that's when we can see frequency being part of that volume trigger when it comes to symptoms. The last one here is going to be, I keep it simple and say range of motion. That's a terrible M. There we go. Range of motion. This is where I see it the most often with back pain. Shoulder pain in the bench press is another one. Knee pain in the squat is one. But you know, these really common injury sites for powerlifters, they'll mention like, yeah, my back starts to flare up when I'm like halfway down on the squat. It's like into the hole is where it starts to hurt. Okay, cool. Just approaching the chest, like an inch to 2 inches off the chest on the descent of bench press is a really common range of motion for people to have discomfort with. Coming down in the squat, the eccentric portion of the squat, having some difficulties with knee pain there, especially in full flexion, all the way in the hole, are range of motion considerations that can trigger symptoms. And the nice thing is, with this Venn diagram, we can see there's always going to be some level of overlap with some of them, but we want to use these 3 buckets to help us organize a plan around these training triggers. So let's, real quick, I'm gonna keep these right here. Actually, let's just write it off to the side. So we've got an athlete with knee pain during the squat. Relevant questions to ask. This is what I want to get really practical here. Really relevant questions to ask. Okay, cool. Is there an intensity threshold? With this individual, we'll say no. So they can lift all the way up to maximum and the intensity doesn't really bother it too terribly much. How about volume? What is their volume threshold? Well, this athlete tells me, I'm good up to about 3 reps, and then the pain starts to increase. Okay, cool. 3 reps total, like if you're doing singles, or 3 reps in a set. Oh no, coach, it's just 3 reps in a set. That's when it starts to bother me. All right, cool. So now we have a cap. Now we can say 3 reps is our ceiling per set for this athlete for this session. It's an important one for this session because you can use this every single session. Next one, range of motion. Where in the range is it hurting? I'm fine until I get all the way into the hole and that knee gets into full flexion. That's when it starts to bother me. All right, great. So we have a full flexion trigger. What they were supposed to do on that day was a 5x5, we'll keep it simple, starting strength style here, on back squat at, say, 80%. Awesome. So our attempt is to try and mimic this. Now, we can't do a full back squat because we don't want to go into full flexion because it's a trigger. We can't do a 5x5 because anything over 3 reps hurt. So we want to try to get to 25 reps at 80%. Now, the 80% we can keep. Why can we keep the 80%? We can keep the 80% because there was no intensity trigger. That's awesome. That means we can work at the capacity we want to work at. So the next thing we have to do is just a little bit of math, and we have to say, how can I turn 3 reps into 25 reps? How many sets is that going to take me? Relatively speaking, an 8x3 becomes our default for this athlete. And then what I would tell them is, all right, cool. We're going to switch you to an 8x3 today. It's going to suck. It's going to suck less than a 5x5, to be completely honest with you, in my personal opinion. But we're going to move to an 8x3, and we're going to get 24 total reps out of the workout today. It's not a bad thing right there. We're still in a really good spot. We're still going to see some great results. And then I have a couple options because I can't go into full flexion. I'm not going to do a full squat here. Maybe I go with a box squat. Maybe I go with a pin squat.
Something I found on bait.com. Yes.
Alexa, stop. Constantly listening. Constantly listening. So maybe I go with one of these 2 variations to make it so that I can control the range of motion outside of where that intolerance is or where that pain is in the range. So this allows me, I'm probably going to be a little bit more privy for a box squat here to switch it up and go, all right, we're going to do an 8x3 for at 80% on the box squat. Done. That's going to be our work for today. This can be done so quickly. That's a 2-minute decision in the gym, on the fly, to manage this athlete's symptoms and get it so that they do some real work in the gym as opposed to being like, okay, well, just try to do some step downs and take it easy today. Because a lot of athletes, when it comes to, hey, just take it easy today, they're only going to be able to tolerate that for so long before they start chewing at the bit and either get super, super frustrated because they're not able to train the way they want to be able to train, or they feel like they're falling behind. So this is the framework that we like to use for our triggers in training: intensity, range of motion, and volume. Appreciate every single one of you. See you on the flip side.